Podcast 129, where we give you boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights. We'll do a lot of that today. Memories and moments, and we do it with an exquisite educatory way about us. I don't know what that... you got to, man. When you're as sagacious, perspicacious, and sapient as us, you got to make shit up sometimes. Anyway, and we're going to do a lot of that. So we're not going to make stuff up, but we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today, a lot to cover with boxing writer, author, CompuBox counter. He is a historian, and according to many, he's a good guy. He should be. He came right out of Friendly, West Virginia. He is Lee Groves, and yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to cover. We thought about having a guest on, and I thought better of it because, well, I'm surprised that the fight card from Saturday night, I think it just ended about 20 minutes ago. Seems like it, right? So we got a lot of stuff to unpack and a lot of stories to get to. We're also going to talk a little bit about the ramifications from the big fight card on Saturday that, of course, featured the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world on my radar, at least the last 6 years, Terence "Bud" Crawford, against Israil Madrimov, who we thought, and he did, give Crawford a lot of issues, made it a good fight. We'll talk about that stacked undercard, and also we'll talk a little bit about the controversies in Olympic boxing and a few other things. So a lot to unpack and uncover and unwind and unravel. So I'll start out with you. Go ahead and you can do some recapping, if you will.
Well, let's get to it. Last week, we said that this was an undercard that promised plenty of action, and it ended up producing plenty of storylines. The first fight on the pay-per-view portion saw Andy Cruz score an 7th round TKO over Antonio Moran to run his record to 4-0 with 2 knockouts. To me, this was a perfect growing up fight for Cruz. He was wobbled by a hook late in round 4, and Moran also had a good 6th. But Cruz dug down. He figured out what he needed to do in order to get the knockout he wanted, and then he delivered it. In other words, Moran was good enough to lay down the challenge, and Cruz was good enough to answer that challenge. The next fight up was David Morrell, who won a secondary title in his second weight class, thanks to a 12-round unanimous decision against 4th-ranked light heavyweight Radivoje Kalajic. This fight was eerily similar to what David Benavidez went through in his 175-pound debut against Alexander Vostik.
And as soon as you told me, and I read some of your stuff, I kind of thought that we might see a lot of similarities because you had done a lot more research on that fight than I had, and you did as you always do, did a great job with it. You're right. It was eerily similar.
It really was. I mean, one commonality is that Benavidez and Morrell didn't have the size advantage at 175 that they usually have at 168. And second, Vostik and Kalajic were good enough and strong enough to force the favorites to dig deeper and get the win on points. Benavidez said that he hurt his hand. He had some injuries going into the fight. That's how he explained his performance. I don't know about what Morrell said, but both Kalajic and Vostik, they got their pound of flesh. They just didn't win. That's all. And then we move on to the
By the way, that theme, we'll see that theme again in the main event, where size can make a difference in terms of not necessarily the winner, but the way they win.
Yep, size does matter. And speaking of size, we move on to the heavyweight division. The night's first really surprising result, at least in terms of the betting odds, which you went over last week, took place when Martin Bakole stopped Jared Anderson in round 5. Bakole scored the first knockdown with an uppercut late in round 1, and then he finished the job with another uppercut followed by a right cross in round 5. Anderson landed plenty of blows, but they had really no effect on Bakole, who was 284 pounds or 285 pounds. he was just impervious. And, as he stalked and walked down Anderson, he looked like a modern day George Foreman. Heavy hands, won't be moved, and very, very powerful. I know you were very impressed with Bacoli.
Yeah, and I would have picked him if I don't bet on the fights, as you know, but I would have picked him. Never been that impressed with Anderson, who I felt had one foot out of the boxing door even before the fight took place. This dude is a bad dude. I know Caleb, our buddy Caleb Plant, has the nickname Sweet Hands. And although that might seem a rather strange nickname for a guy so huge, but I tell you what, the variation of his punches, the way he goes about placing them, and not every shot is hard, and some shots are used to align the opponent up for another shot. And his uppercuts kind of reminded me of something Jerry Cooney wouldn't want to think of. And it's the way that Foreman would just casually walk in after he dropped Cooney and bam, with that uppercut. And boy, did Anderson show a lot of inexperience with, maybe I'm sure he had never been hit like that or hurt like that, because after each knockdown, you know what he did? He walked right back to his opponent and made it so much easier. By the way, young fighters, even experienced fighters out there, when you get knocked down, take as much time as you can to recover, if you can think to do that. But yeah, I was very impressed, and much like Zhang had burst onto the scene, this guy, for the time being, has really a shot at making a lot of noise in the heavyweight division, where with his size, he can make a lot of noise and create a lot of problems for his opponents.
And not only that, not only is he a big guy, not only is he a powerful guy, he's a volume puncher.
Yeah.
He holds the number 2 and number 3 spots in the most punches ever thrown by a heavyweight in a single round. It was in the 140s.
And the reason he can do that, Lee, is not, as what I mentioned, not every punch is hard. Right. He throws a lot of shots, and you don't see a lot of big guys that do that. That's, a great stat.
It really is, and he's very accurate, and he's very powerful. He's going to be a problem for the champions. For anybody in the heavyweight division, he's going to be a big problem.
I agree, and we won't get into it, but I wonder, and not just because of one fight, but because of a lot of things with Anderson, who he is or isn't, I wonder whether he will ever be able to really come back from that, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that was a pretty extended amount of punishment that he took. And as you said, he had one foot out the door as far as, but he doesn't seem to have the passion for boxing. He has a passion for making money, but does he have the passion to go above and beyond? He tried to against Bacoli, but Bacoli was just too much. Now we move on to the next fight, and that also had a somewhat surprising result, in that Andy Ruiz Jr., who was favored to win, he fought a draw with Jarrell Miller. And last week I picked Ruiz to win on points, but when I saw that Ruiz scaled a heavy for him 274.5, and Miller scaled 305.5, which is 27.5 pounds lighter, was against Daniel Dubois last December, I really thought about changing my pick. And really, in retrospect, I should have. Andy Ruiz showed the effects of his nearly 2-year layoff, and Miller took advantage by letting his hands go in the final moments of many rounds. He might have stolen some rounds. It's been a while since Ruiz has looked impressive, and you have to wonder how much he still has in the tank. And as for Miller, I think he's breathed new life into his career.
Well, let's not forget what Ruiz did after he won the heavyweight title. Right. Let's look at what he did. Kind of, we saw it with the Buster Douglas effect. Listen, if Andy were to wake up in the morning and there was a camera put on him and he says, what's your favorite word that starts with a B? It wouldn't be boxing. It would be buffet. He just cares more about eating than he does about fighting. And I like him. He's a good fighter. I actually think I had him beating, I think it was Joseph Parker way back in the day when they fought. I think that was, it might have been in New Zealand. But
it was.
Miller won the damn fight. Miller, he did steal, and it's not stealing rounds, it's winning rounds. If neither guy's doing a whole hell of a lot, and then at the end of it, you pop. Plus, he was doing more of what he wanted to do. Ruiz did have a hand injury, but I'll be honest with you, and I like Andy. I don't want to see him fight again. No interest. Now, I'm not interested in Miller much either, but he won that fight. But yeah, continue.
If he continues to be in that kind of shape, he's going to make some noise, and who knows? Who knows what could happen? Big guy with power. The co-main event produced yet another betting surprise, and that was Jose Valenzuela Jr. He won the WBA belt at 140 with a unanimous decision over Isaac Cruz. This is the third consecutive fight in which a man winning, that a guy making his divisional debut at 140 wins the WBA title. Rolly Romero did it against Ismael Barroso. Isaac Cruz did it against Rolly, and now Valenzuela did it against Cruz. Last week, I said that Valenzuela had the height, the reach, the skill to outbox Cruz from long range, but I doubted whether he had the discipline to maintain it for 12 rounds. Turns out he did, and it really was a tour de force when it comes to ring generalship. People wonder, what exactly is ring generalship? It's sort of the most nebulous of the four judging factors. All you have to do is show them a tape of that fight with Valenzuela and Isaac Cruz. That's ring generalship.
Yeah, he controlled the landscape. He did a brilliant job of, it was like the Matador versus the Bull. Yeah. And it really resembled that as well. And the way he would make his decision when he would get on the rope, just when you're saying, uh-oh, here come, bam, he's gone. To the left, to the right. There were times when Cruz was able to cut off the ring, start to get going, and then he did the smart thing that I tell fighters, grab, tie up, clinch, did a brilliant job of that, and then go back to that center of the ring. Go back to that center of the ring where it was a beautiful performance by him, by Valenzuela.
Right. It really was. It was very impressive. And you got to really like his story. It wasn't that long ago that he was knocked out by Edwin De Los Santos. And we thought, oh, well, this guy, yeah, he made a flash somewhere down the line. But then he came back. He lost a disputed decision to Chris Colbert. They had an immediate rematch. Valenzuela knocked Colbert unconscious virtually. He gets this title shot and he cashed in.
That's a great point. It's nice that he can prove that there's not just one damn path to a world championship. You typically, the way you do it is you come out of the amateurs. Well, not anymore. We'll get to the amateurs later. But you come out of the amateurs and you have a pro career. You sign up with somebody, you have a pro career, and you're carefully matched with different types of people. And if you're on with a big promotional company, you're usually easily matched until a certain point. And, a loss can derail everything. Oh, my God, you can't lose. You can't have the zero goes away. You're done. Your career is over. It's not, especially if you keep putting in the work and you continue to improve and perfect your skills. You work on your mind. You have the focus. There's different paths to a world championship, and he proved that.
He really did. And as far as the undercard recaps, that's it.
Well, there was one more fight on that card. It just finished about 45 minutes ago because, of course, we had, I don't know how many tributes we had to Turk. I think there were at last count about 72 people lining up to kiss the rings or bow to the turban, whatever it's called. And then, of course, we had Eminem. Just always get nervous when I see dudes that age and their pants are about to fall down. I always want to say, pull them up, but I guess he's experienced enough, He's a wonderful performer. I think he's one of the best at what he does. But then came Crawford and Madrimov, and that'll come from us back to you right after this.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back on in this corner of the podcast with Lee Groves as we finally get to the main event that was Saturday night. And Bud Crawford, Israil Madrimov. Last week we broke it down with Tommy Yankello and Regis Prograis and you and yours truly. And we all kind of thought this dude was a dude to be reckoned with. He had the kind of style and the size and the attributes to make it a difficult night for Crawford, and he did.
He really did. We all spotted the fact that this guy was actually very talented. He had this blocky body, but he had speed, both of hand and of foot. It really was a chess match. Madrimov went thought for thought and punch for punch with Bud Crawford. And we thought going into the fight that this was going to be a dress rehearsal for a potential fight with Canelo Alvarez, considering Madrimov was built along those same lines as Canelo. But it just happened in the last couple of days that Turki Al-Sheikh said, nope, looks like that fight is off. We're going to go to other options as far as Crawford is concerned. And so we don't know where he's going to go from here. Vergil Ortiz is being talked about.
Before we get to that, why don't you, I think you had some numbers to demonstrate how close the fight was. You had it a little closer on the scorecards than I did, but the numbers were really aligned, weren't they?
They were. The fight ended up being 116-112 on one card, 115-113 on the other two. That's about how I scored it, or how I saw it. I didn't score it round by round. It was 1 a.m. at the time that the fight started. So, No,
it wasn't. It was 10 p.m.
Oh, okay. Right. Vegas.
Yeah.
I gotcha. But statistically speaking, Crawford threw many more punches. He threw 433 to 275. But because Madrimov was much more accurate, 31% to 22% overall, 35% to 26% in power shots, Crawford ended the fight just 11 ahead, 95 to 84. The fighters were separated by 4 or fewer total connects in 11 of the 12 rounds. Bud led 7 rounds to 5 in the CompuBox round-by-round breakdown of total connects, which usually lines up pretty well with well-judged fights.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, 2 of the judges had it 7-5, and I scored it 7-5. You had it a little bit wider. I think it was 17-13.
Yeah, I had it 17-13, but you just wonder, and I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but I was saying during the fight, it's a good thing for Crawford that Madrimov is not utilizing his jab.
Yeah.
I thought a lot of those rounds Crawford won by just putting out the jab there a little bit more, thus setting up a few more combinations and a little bit better of controlling the landscape somewhat. Yeah. I thought Madrimov, feinted maybe a little bit too much, and instead of feigning, should have added some, repertoire with his punches to all of that, and he didn't do that enough. But, and again, by the way, the dude's only had, 11 pro fights, right?
Right.
So let's give him a break. I know he had an extensive amateur career, but there's amateur career and there's Bud Crawford. So honestly, the fight went almost exactly how we all thought it would. I thought that if Crawford could get a stoppage, I thought it might be like round 11. By the way, that was his best round, I thought. But credit to Madrimov and And, well, the Turk's doing his own pause in talk of fighting the redhead. Maybe maybe Crawford will do his own pause. Maybe he'll think better of it because, hey, my punches had no effect on this dude.
No.
Canelo has one of the great beards in all of boxing. It's red when he grows it, I think. But, he has one of the great beards. He's much easier to hit, in my opinion, than Madrimov would be. Crawford could build a much easier lead. However, Canelo has much greater power, and he's, smarter as a fighter than Madrimov due to his tremendous experience. So Bud's got some time to pause and think about everything. I still would love to see the fight, and I'm not discounting it. Turk might have taken it off the table doing some collective bargaining, negotiations. But we'll see. But the fight went as it should. Let's not even think about Crawford right now. We know what he can do with all the fights and Boots and Ortiz and others.
Sure.
But for Madrimov, I don't think this hurts his status at all. And I would love to see him fight against some of the other dudes at a buck 54 or 60 or whatever. So, but I got to tell you though, he's going to have to add some stuff, some volume, some power, some more, because feints aren't going to win fights as he goes up. Feints and movement, great dexterity, but you got to do something with that. And I think he could and perhaps will. So that's just he's a good fighter, man. He's a real good fighter.
He is a really good fighter. And you're right. He enhanced his status with his performance against Crawford. He got in his share of licks for sure. And I think that Crawford, he opened the fight as a right-hander, but he stayed in the right-handed stance for a very short time. Then he switched to southpaw, sort of gave him a different look. Crawford brings a lot to the table when it comes to brain power. And I think Madrimov kind of got caught up into that. Plus, the southpaw stance, I've always said, neutralizes the jab. And the absence of the jab was probably Madrimov's biggest tactical error. You said that he should have jabbed.
Yeah.
Even if it's going to miss, it always pays to throw the jab, right?
It's the can opener. And it can be used offensively, defensively. It can be used strategically, tactically. And by putting it out there, unless you're doing it in an unprofessional manner, negates what the other dude is doing. And, for example, that's why you always say, even if you don't have the greatest of jabs, what do you do against a great jabber? You jab. You don't hook with that hooker, but you jab with the jabber. So just think, with a few more jabs, going by the numbers, the fight would have almost been identical. But again, we got what we expected. Canelo's got other business in September.
Yeah.
Bud's got a lot to think about. And by the way, and there may be some that disagree with this, but Crawford was off a year, and as great as he looked against Spence, we're all going to find out what we already know on this show. Spence was a completely shot fighter when he went into the ring that night here in Las Vegas. And so a little bit too much was made, I think, of that performance.
I do. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah.
A lot of the chatter online expressed disappointment with Bud's performance. And we said on this show, the Spence fight was a very high bar for Bud to reach. And I thought it was unfair to expect that he would do it against a younger, bigger, stronger guy and coming off a year layoff at age nearly 37. Considering what Bud did, he did very well. He did very well. He won the fight. He became a 4-division world champion. I don't think it was enough for him to leapfrog Usyk and Inoue. I know that remark on Twitter got a lot of negative reaction my way, but you take a look at what Usyk and Inoue have done, and Bud's only fought one time in each of the last 4 years, or each of now the last 5 years. Activity and accomplishment, it's a dynamic thing, this pound for pound race.
Yeah.
And by having Bud number 3 compared with those two guys, that's no slight at all. You can actually interchange the 3 of them and come up with a pretty good order.
Yeah, I agree with you. To me, that it's like a flip of a coin.
It is,
you know, and
three-sided.
we're gonna flip the coin right now and tease us. What do we got when we come back here? You prepared this illustrious script for me. What do we have coming back?
Yeah, we have. We're going to be previewing a couple of cards. One that's going to be on DAZN. There's going to be a YouTube DAZN. On the DAZN card, there's a YouTube portion. There's a fight there, and then another tornado warning could be coming up along the way. So to find out where that is,
we'll be back.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back on In This Corner of the Podcast 129, he is Lee Groves. I am Smitty most of the time. Got a lot of good stuff coming up on the show. I can't give you the dates of these interviews, these guests, but Holt McCallany, the star, movie star, and he's done we kind of got to know him from the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Recently, he was in the Iron Claw, and now he's going to be in a Netflix series, The Waterfront, it's called. He's done a lot. He did Lights Out series, the boxing series. Holt McCallany is going to be on the show. We're getting into, they had the Hall of Fame game. That means the NFL season is right around the corner. And by golly, I got to start honoring the only team in boxing, the only team in football history in the NFL that resides in Perfectville, and that's the Miami Dolphins. I spoke to my dear friend Paul Warfield a while back and Mercury Morris, and they both agreed to do the show. I just got to line that up. And I actually I told you this, I want to, during the course of the season, honor some more of those guys because I was privileged enough to be a ball boy for that team, and I take that team so seriously, as everybody should, for what they accomplished. And so I want to get some of the other dudes on from that great team, the ones that are left with us. So many have passed away. And I could name right off the top of my head 30 different boxing guests that we're going to have on. So we started out, when we talk about this show, boxing's biggest names. They will continue to be on In This Corner, the podcast. But on this one, it's the big names of Smitty and Mr. Groves, who will take it away with, I guess you got some previews to do.
We do have previews. And this particular card on DAZN will also have a portion that will be streamed exclusively on YouTube. And originally, the main event was supposed to have matched Emma Kozin and Cecilia Braekhus for the vacant WBC and WBO belts at 154. But that changed when Kozin, who's a native of Slovenia, was unable to secure a visa to enter the United States. So as a result, the main event will now be between Braekhus and Maricela Cornejo for the WBC interim belt at 154. Now, in terms of accomplishment at world title level, Braekhus, I say, is the greatest female fighter of all time. And here's why. She held the WBA and WBC welterweight titles for 11 years, 157 days. That's just 98 days short of Joe Louis's longevity record for a consecutive one reign in terms of time. And she tied Joe Louis with 25 successful defenses of the WBC welterweight version. She also made 10 successful defenses of her undisputed 140-pound championship, a record for the four-belt era that is not likely ever to be broken. Braekhus is now 42 years old, and she's 1-2-1 in her last 4 fights. So victory is hardly certain. But as for Cornejo, she's 37, and she will be making her 5th attempt to win a world title. She lost to Kaylee Reese in 2016. She lost twice to Franchon Cruz de Zern in 2018 and 2019. And she also lost to Claressa Shields in 2023. So for both women, this is a real crossroads fight. It's a tough one to call, but I think Braekhus wins on point.
Well, whenever Braekhus crosses that road, she crosses it right over into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota, because that's tremendous accomplishments that you just chronicled there.
Yeah, the First Lady of Boxing, she is called. Next up, once the switch is made to DAZN, one of the prominent undercard fights will see an alum of our show, Gabriela Fundora. She will defend her IBF flyweight title for the second time against Daniela Asenjo, who at 33 years old is almost exactly 12 years older than Gabriela. By fighting Fundora, Asenjo will seek to become the second widely recognized champion who hails from Chile. The first was Carolina Rodriguez, who held the IBF bantamweight title for a little more than a year, a decade ago. And Asenjo will be making her United States debut. She has fought mostly at 115 and 118 during her career, so it'll be interesting to see how Gabriela's power will affect her, especially since she's never been stopped. I think this fight could go the distance. It probably will go the distance, but I think Gabriela will walk out as the winner. She's been looking really good in her last few fights. And then we move on to the main event, which will see Vergil Ortiz challenge Serhii Bohachuk for Bohachuk's WBC interim belt at 154. And on paper, this looks like a barn burner. The champion comes into the fight with a record of 24-1 with 23 knockouts and is coming off an impressive unanimous decision against Brian Mendoza that won him this particular title. Ortiz walks into the ring with a perfect record, 21-0, 21 knockouts. And according to BoxRec, the last time Ortiz heard the final bell was in May 2016, more than 8 years ago. He lost a 3-round split decision against Frank Martin, who appeared on our show earlier this year. The styles seem to match pretty well. What do you expect to see in this fight? Because I know you've done Bohachuk's fights before, have you not?
Yeah, I called a fight of his a few years ago in California, and what I saw from him was a guy who has tremendous offense, but lacking a little bit in defense, and perhaps that may be because he has so much offense and the opponents he was facing gets hit a lot, at least in what I've seen, and that's not a good recipe against what you just mentioned with Ortiz. I think this could be one hell of a fight, like fight of the year kind of fight, on paper. And I think on paper will transfer to the ring. I expect a barn burner. Got to give it the edge to Ortiz. Would not surprise me. Well, it kind of would surprise me because I just think Ortiz is that much better. Mm-hmm. But this could be one where he really faces some adversity. And you love to see that with a guy who has the record and accomplishment that he has. And for Bohachuk, if he tightens up that defense a little bit and fights a smart fight, it's one that you all should watch. It really is.
Very, very much so. I mean, Bohachuk is I think he's 6 feet tall. He has a 73-inch reach. He's going to have height and reach advantages over Ortiz, something Ortiz hasn't seen a lot of. And while he has the skills to maximize those advantages, I think his temperament is that of a warrior. And if he's going to win the fight, he's going to have to do something similar to what Jose Valenzuela did. And that's use the height and reach and remain disciplined and offensive minded, but keep Ortiz at arm's length so he can't reach you so easily. I do think, considering his history, that as soon as Bohachuk is hit with a really solid shot, he will shift into warrior mode and start to trade. And against a sharpshooter like Vergil Ortiz, that could be disastrous. I see.
And don't forget about the body attack of Ortiz.
Yes, very much so. Yes. I do think that Ortiz's precision will take over. His power will take over. It'll be a really good fight, but I see Ortiz winning by TKO. few weeks ago, we debuted our tornado warning video because I felt the conditions were present for Steve Claggett to pull the upset over WBO 140-pound champ Teofimo Lopez. But although the conditions were present, I didn't predict the outright upset because Teofimo was fully prepared for the challenge. This time, however, I am going to pick the upset. The main event of tomorrow night's ESPN show will see Luis Alberto Lopez defend his IBF featherweight title against former WBO 122-pound titleist Angelo Leo in Leo's hometown of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Now, to me, Alexander Usyk is the top road warrior among boxers in the 21st century, but Lopez isn't that far behind. The native of Mexico has beaten Americans in America. He stopped Isaac Lowe and Josh Warrington in England, and he stopped Michael Conlan in Ireland. He'll probably be favored in this fight. He's the champion. But the reason why I think Leo will win is because he's aggressive. He's a very fast starter. He's a volume puncher. He's one of boxing's most dedicated body punchers. He has a terrific chin. He has lots of stamina, and he's gotten better in the 3 years since losing the belt to Stephen Fulton. He has a style that wears out opponents over time, and while he doesn't have a high KO percentage, he has scored body shot knockouts, the most recent of which happened against Mike Plania a couple of fights ago. I really think that Lopez deserves credit that he's taking this fight at all, because Leo's not even the mandatory challenger. He's ranked 11th by the IBF. I do think that while Lopez has dangerous out of the blue power, I believe that Leo's consistency and his home ring advantage will lift him to a different level. And I think he'll win a unanimous decision over Lopez. What do you think? You know Lopez fairly well. What do you think of this fight?
Yeah. And I've sat with Leo at a fight one time, and he told me he was a fan of my work. So you know how that plays with Smitty, right? When they're, I think Leo is more fundamentally sound. I think that's a pretty safe statement. Maybe you might be more fundamentally sound than than Lopez.
I know nothing.
I don't know if Leo, and I don't even think he doesn't have to hurt him, but he has to get his attention. Yeah. He can do that with the body work. I can see your pick. I mean, you're pretty damn good at your picks. I think it's a real close fight. I would lean towards Lopez because of his awkwardness and what he's done. But I tell you, if they're, the precipitation I can see out there, and there's storm clouds and a little bit of thunder, and we'll see. We will see. And what we'll also see, speaking of storm clouds and precipitation and stuff, the Olympics. We'll talk about the situation with the 2024 Olympic boxing situation. We've got a few other tidbits to close out this show, and we'll do that after you see this.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back, final segment in this corner of the podcast, 129. The Olympics, Paris, boxing. There's some good, bad, and indifferences, some X's and Y's and Y's and X's, and take it away.
We know the biggest story of the 2024 Olympic boxing competition surrounds two boxers, one from Algeria and the other from Taiwan, both of whom had gender identity issues that reignited the larger debate regarding transgenderism in sports, although neither athlete is transgender under the usual definition. So in last year's World Amateur Championships that were conducted by the IBA, with International Boxing Association, I think they ran boxing for many years, Algeria's Iman Khalef and Lin Yu Ting were declared ineligible to compete because their tests produced results that were inconsistent with athletes who were born female. The IOC, International Olympic Committee, however, allowed both of them to compete. And as we are taping on Tuesday, both have secured at least a bronze medal. Now, while neither are transgender in the classic sense, they have been identified with having DSD, which stands for differences in sexual development. While pure females have XX chromosomes, Khalef and Lin have male XY chromosomes and do not have any internal organs associated with females, such as a uterus, fallopian tubes, ovaries, and so on.
Because normally women are XX and men are XY.
Correct. And because of these XY chromosomes, their bodies are capable of producing more testosterone and thus more punching power, at least in theory, which not only presents a larger physical danger to the XX athletes, but also a larger psychological danger. I think that had a lot to do with the fight that really sparked this controversy. It was Khalef's 46-second stoppage of Italy's Angela Carini. After Khalef landed a straight right to the face, Carini walked over to her corner, and the fight was stopped. What really stoked the fires on both sides was the sight of Carini falling to her knees and crying after the KO was announced. And both sides have been going at it ever since. Where do you fall on this issue?
You know, I've always been pretty good at X's and O's. When it gets to X's and X's and X's and Y's and the whole gender thing, the more I research it, the more confused I get, because I'm not a doctor. In those studies, a few people sent me articles, and I watched a couple lectures and got a lot out of those. But the more I got, again, the more confused I am. And I mean, and you mentioned her, that Carini, she was just petrified going into that fight. She wanted out of there before she got in there. It was almost like the Mike Tyson effect.
Yeah.
And, the Algerian is not Mike Tyson, but I think she has improved dramatically, because she suffered 8 or 9 losses during her career. I think she even had a professional fight where she won. But here's where I do come down on it, trying to be, honestly, as sensitive as I can be. But this is boxing. This is the ultimate, I hate the word combat. It's a contact sport. And it's where contact can render you senseless or useless, dead, So where I fall right now is, and I would love to hear other people's comments, but I fall where men should fight men, women should fight women, and these humans and athletes who fall with these different conditions should fight each other if there's a way to do that. And there's probably not enough of them that you can have an Olympic category for them. If you can, I'm all for it. Then they would be included. I'm not for any exclusion.
Right.
But with boxing and with sports like that, and running would be in, and weightlifting and anything where it's just clearly, testosterone, I have to side with, boys versus boys, girls versus girls, and the rest versus the rest. Yeah. If we can do that, because just for the safety factor and for the integrity, you don't want that athlete to be said, oh, well, the only reason she won is because she's not a she, or vice, whatever. That's not fair to that athlete. No. So if I'm making any sense at all, men fight men, women fight women, and the transgender society situation, or these with these different X's and Y's and anything that's out of the norm, hopefully they could figure out a way to have a classification where they could fight each other. That's the only logic, Lee, that I've been able, and I apologize for not having more to say, but I tried to do as much research as I could. And I unlike everybody else on X and on, speaking of Twitter, X, maybe it should be an XY. I don't know what it is, but I'm not an expert on that. You know, I'm an expert on boxing, but I will say I've been to about 6 fights where people got killed. And, and I also feel bad for if this person, you and I talked about this, you brought out a great point, where if this female knows or is unsure, I'm going to be fighting, and I don't know, who this individual is, and I'm hearing all this, and with social media, man, you're beaten before you get into it. So men fight men, women fight women, and the rest fight the rest in their own categories. And how do we solve that? We don't, but we've got other issues to solve and other fish to fry. And I feel bad for anybody who is treated unfairly. So the best thing we can try to do is figure out a way to be fair. But sometimes things are unfair, and sometimes life is cruel, and sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind.
Yeah. There are nuances to this story. It really is. I don't believe that either boxer is trying to game the system as swimmer Leah Thomas did.
Yeah.
Leah Thomas transitioned, was a male swimmer in the 400s, I think, when he swam against men. But then when he transitioned over, Leah Thomas became a multi-time national champion. That says something, and he hasn't gone through any surgeries or whatever, just whatever.
I don't think they're doing a Lance Armstrong either. That it's not a
no.
But somewhere in this, and if we are, if we ever get, and we will, let's just get an expert on, to help us. We're the experts on boxing, and we're not on this. But I've said my piece on it. One thing, I'll go a little further. I think if we really were to do a deep dive into this, we've seen athletes in other sports where we've paused, whether it's steroids or like a Cyborg with MMA, and with certain, even some of the basketball players, because of their height and their voice. And we've questioned, people have made comments about that. Where do those pipes come from, or where does that, whatever, genetics is an amazing thing. It's really amazing. And some of our greatest athletes, the reason they have been so great is they have certain attributes, but those attributes don't make it an unfair advantage that we know about. Maybe it's only unfair because they're so damn good and have these type of things, whether it be great strength, great speed. And if it's all natural speed and natural strength, and all of that, it's when it becomes unnatural. And that's where you get into the whole steroid things. And this is not that story. It's a different one. And the fact that we're both still here looking like two confused white guys means that, we're both still confused white guys. Although actually I'm Irish and Lebanese, and I don't know what the hell you are. But anyway, let's bounce.
Well, I have a couple of remarks that I'd like to inject here. I do think that while they're not trying to game the system, I think the IOC is playing with fire. It might not ignite here, but it may tragically flare up in a future Olympics. I mean, neither Kalev or Lin are devastating punchers, but what if a competitor with significant punching power and who has the same XY situation competes in a future Olympics and inflicts a career-ending or maybe even a life-threatening injury? What does the IOC do then? Look, we both know that boxing is a sport whose objective is to hit the opponent as many times as possible. And with those XY chromosomes, they have the capacity to hit much harder than those with XX chromosomes. For many years, amateur boxing has touted itself as the paragon of safety. But with this ruling, they're greatly contradicting themselves. If ring safety is still the ultimate objective, and it really should be, then the solution is easy. Like you said, allow women's boxing to remain a purely XX sport and create a separate division for XY boxers like Kalev and Lin, who don't want to compete with the men. If there aren't enough competitors to have such a division, so be it. That's what Caitlyn Jenner, formerly known as 1976 Olympic decathlon champion Bruce Jenner, says, and I agree. I think that it's a solution that's not going to make everybody happy, but it's the safest thing, and safety in boxing is paramount.
And the Jenner name might be a good segue into what I think is going to be our final topic, I think.
Well, yeah. Well, I do want to go into one bright subject as far as American U.S. Olympic boxing. And let's congratulate Amari Jones. He is the only member of the U.S. boxing team to earn a medal at this year's Olympics. He advanced to the medal round with victories over competitors from Chinese Taipei and Bulgaria. And in doing so, he becomes the first American to medal in this weight class since Kenny Gould did it in 1988. And as we speak, the last American male to win a gold medal in boxing was Andre Ward in the 2004 Olympics in Athens. And Ward is now retired and in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And that's how long the drought has happened. So as we are taping on Tuesday, he is set to fight an opponent from Uzbekistan in the medal round. And given Uzbekistan's history in the Olympics in recent years, he has a tall task ahead of him, but we wish him the best of luck. And, you know, in our many phone conversations, as we talked about this Olympic controversy and all that, you mentioned to me that you had a lot of Olympians on your radio show, Smitty Sports Talk.
Yeah.
And I got to say, it's a very impressive list of guys that you've had on. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Yeah, I was trying to think names like, in fact, Jenner, when he was Bruce Jenner.
Right.
Was on, of course. I think Dwight Stones.
High jumper.
Yeah. Carl Lewis came and did a live remote with me at Beefsteak Charlie's in good old Fort Myers, as did a guy who became a real good friend of mine. And he had some controversy, Butch Reynolds, who for a long time was the world record holder at 400 meters.
Yeah, Michael Johnson.
He also had some controversy, I think, was with a steroid situation, but competed in a few Olympics. A great guy.
Yeah.
Who I'm trying to think. Order I told you about. Yeah, that was towards the end of my radio career there in Fort Myers. Edwin Moses, the great Edwin Moses. Was there a better high jumper ever?
Actually, Edwin Moses was the 400-meter
hurdles. Yeah.
Yes.
400 meter. I'm thinking of jumping over the hurdles. I can't think of anybody that was better as a hurdler, seriously, than him. I mean, there's certainly been people that have broken his records, but for years he dominated that particular sport for years.
Okay. He had one of the longest winning streaks in track and field history.
And I remember when we talked about how his precision into the level of steps until he would get, and just tremendous hurdler. He was on, and the list probably goes on. I just tried to, when I was doing radio, Smitty Sports Talk, honor all the different sports. One of the things I prided myself in for so many years, 20 years plus doing radio, was to have all the guys on from all the different sports. And I loved, there's not much more exciting than the 100 meters, for example.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a heavyweight championship fight. Of course, it usually, unless you're talking Mike Tyson, it goes a little less time than most although Mike Tyson had some that were almost 10 seconds, right? But yeah. And on that note, we have again, a world, another Olympic champion from the United States. We now again hold the fastest man in the world title, right?
Yeah, correct. And what a race it was. It was decided.
Oh my gosh.
5
Photo finish.
thousandths of a second.
Yeah. Yeah. So all those guys, Carl Lewis and Butch Reynolds, and I know Jackie Joyner-Kersee was another.
Greatest heptathlete ever.
Yeah. So and again, the Edwin Moses. And I know there's some I was trying to figure out about Houston McTeer, whether I had him. I think I did. But hey, that's a great list, and I love to interview them and to talk about their greatness. And fortunately, we have had some good moments in the Ledecker and Biles, and we've had some great performances. Maybe Jones can get a gold. Hopefully, you said as we tape, he still has a shot. And then there's been the controversies. But I hope we did as good a job as we're capable of giving our opinions on it. And I know you wanted to end with something you just found out, some good stuff about our pal Regis Prograis.
Yeah, earlier today it was reported that we had Regis on last week, just hours after the news broke that his August 24th fight with Jack Catterall had been postponed because of an injury. Well, the fight has been rescheduled. There's a new date, October 26th. And it's going to be held at the same venue, Manchester, England. So Regis is going to be playing Road Warrior
again,
and hopefully our buddy will go over and give it his best shot and come back with a victory.
All righty, good for Regis. We certainly will get him on again prior to that fight. You will, of course, be back in the seat with us next week. In this corner, the podcast 129. That's a wrap.